new look at things in a slightly different way. We have covered pretty much how everything works over the past 15 years. This has led to some fantastic interactions with our audience, and a live stream I did the other night really reinforced that, and I'm going to be doing some more of those because I wasn't sure whether that sort of thing was working and whether it was informative enough, but indeed it seems to be. But having covered every aspect of the current drivers of global change and described the who, what, when and where, I would now like to do some shows which may cause an outbreak of real thinking. These shows will be in the form of statements which may arouse, hopefully, some inspiration. Some of the best thinkers I have found are actually listeners to this show, and there is a broad spectrum of people who listen. So, what I would like to do now is hone down the information and get into real, localized solutions. When I say localized, I mean small cells of people who are acting outside the mainstream. And the mainstream is, of course, the so-called alternative media. They are all under the same banner and all follow pretty much the same rules within the governance structure in which they operate. So yeah, this is encouraging. I have decided to work on what matters now, and not what is being imposed broadly, but what actually lies behind the facade, which we have gone into over the years, and anyone who goes back into our archive will find enough information in there to accurately piece together exactly, or pretty much exactly, how things work. Several statements in these presentations, I hope, may strike a chord. A bit more like the Zen master slapping you in the face than the intellectual cul-de-sac or the fake revolutionary spirit, which has already been accounted for and has captured and steered the unthinking into the inevitable and planned cul-de-sac, where they now reside. Most people who listen to this show know the pointless absurdity of going back to the head of the snake through its administration for help. So with that in mind, let's carry on, because it is as fruitless in a way as participating in your own demise. There is absolutely no point. The subservient and those who are being steered, and those who are also being steered to oppose those who they think are being steered, are all in fact doing the same thing, and that can't really be reiterated enough. They are being successful at having their time, energy, beliefs and property, intellectual and physical of course, appropriated through diversion. The idea is to attract thinkers, as the plan being implemented steers everyone and all away from what is actually important and into Pavlovian and utterly predicted actions. The basic human reactions are all factored in, of course, so no use in going back into the already predicted outcomes, which all, it seems, are following, and most are being led by the clueless, uninformed, ego-driven, or merely agents of the plan. The unsuspecting categories become agents of the plan unconsciously, as they do not yet know the true nature of the plan. And that is something which has been so apparently obvious to me for many, many years. Those that know little or nothing are promoted to lead those who believe they are in opposition. They lead those who believe they are in opposition straight into the hands of the controllers. And I've watched this time and time and time again, and I was always amazed as to how many people actually were hoodwinked into this process. Well, it's 99.99% actually. And then the outliers, usually less than 1%, in effect, are hung out to dry or attacked. So, what, if anything, is outside the plan? Well, the word initiative created fear in the Global Action Plan. That is why there is strict adherence to education as indoctrination, psychological control through barefaced lies, and fear promoted from a variety of angles, but they're merely to cover the real drivers of change and the despotic control which is now being forced upon all. The snake, let's call it the snake because that's what they call themselves, the Brotherhood of the Snake, also masquerading under a religious fraternity, has a head and the body. The body of the snake does its administrative and agency work, and that may include you. Don't be so surprised, because we've all been useful idiots for this agenda at some time or other. The head, of course, though, has better things to do. The body has infiltrated everything in every country through agency. The head of the snake is unseen and has no structure in the eyes of the gullible. What scares it is initiative and unpredictability. Where would today's technocrats be without their predictable outcomes and artificial intelligence? The whole of the law has to be the law. So the world globalist religion, according to the protocols, is the law. Religion is law. Law is religion. Nothing can be done outside the law in their system. The use of the law is now to subjugate and destroy all counter-narratives and, of course, all opposition. I'm not talking about law in the respect of something which benefits the cattle or something they believe they have access to and can work for them. Example, of course, of this is the fake idea of common law, which has been bestowed on the idiots by those very people who they think they are opposing. Because the whole idea of this fake common law and the idea that people's common courts of law or people's common law courts could have any effect was all given to them by the very people who are controlling them, the very people who will take what they have, their intellectual and physical property. I'm talking about law as the religion of control. This was stated in the protocols nearly 1.5 centuries ago and is echoed in every document and initiative which is imposed upon the world by consent by the world's puppet governments. They call them their agenteurs. Let's call them the agents of the Global Action Plan. So where and what is opposition? Well, real opposition is not the opposition you may be familiar with through all forms of media. The mainstream as the mainframe. The gatekeeping fake libertarians who rail against injustice and pretend to display common sense, or the fake underground of alternative media. All these are doing their job to keep the system out of the reach and understanding of what the head of the snake refer to as cattle. The head of the snake do not have online talking shops. Their work is not for the public to see. They are not on Telegram. They own it. So why are those they call cattle sharing their lack of knowledge and planning with the enemy in the places owned by the enemy? They are too trusting, communitarian, gullible and reactionary to put together a plan in private which may benefit them, which is all the head of the snake did over the past several hundred years. They had a plan of infiltration, and most people were too busy, too gullible and too reactionary to even realise what was going on until it was too late. An example of the word law as religion is, say, the online harms paper. This will take away all under the banner of keeping you safe from hate. It will also keep you away from thought and truth. The word hate is used to describe any organisation or individual who may have a small piece of truth which may be used as evidence against the law system of the global plan. The UN think tanks, NGOs and corporations are used to create the imposed narrative. I suggested an idea in the previous show to form an anti-degeneration league. The Anti-Degeneration League, the ADL, could become the real law. It is what would be classed, though, as hate speech, An organisation, though, however, with no visible members. How could this be? An organisation which appeared like the Order of the Rose Cross, with a cover story to cover its real purpose. The Brotherhood of the Snake know that the cattle are too reactionary, too predictable, too outraged to think like they do. They can be instantly triggered, and they have no long-term plan. They are reactionaries, as they are given what they are being forced to react to. The head of the snake knows this. Anything which is true and not regulated under the pretext of law may cause harm. The latest infiltration of the mind in the form of a yellow and blue flag has once again trapped the cattle, and they are working hard towards the end game with every enabling repetition of their implanted false beliefs. All are bringing about their own downfall. The project in Ukraine is a globalist project. The cattle will fight over the distractions until, of course, they are given the next instruction. But who cares whether their puppet, the compromised clown Zelensky, gets hung out to dry? Not the creators and enablers of this clown show, that is for sure. It is likely that he will be used as some kind of martyr for the mentally subnormal who cheer on this grotesque parody of what is called a president. The head of the snake must be laughing like demons over the suicidal instincts of the fully compromised and infiltrated Westerner who has been created to have the ability to destroy his or herself. And this is the big difference in thinking between the cattle and those who wish and have control over them. It is definitely an unnatural scheme in the big scheme of things. Even if the universe is not still expanding, it cannot be contracting faster than the mind of the current Homo sapiens. There is some great comedy to be had amongst all this, though. Basic concepts are getting harder to grasp by an increasing majority. On a personal level, I have found this problem to be accelerating. For instance, over the past few months, I have found that there seems to be a loss of basic communication. There have been several examples where I have not been able to actually get through to people who have misquoted and completely misinterpreted what I've said. It's almost like whatever you say does not get taken on board because they've already made their minds up. This, of course, is part of the programming that's gone on. It could also be part of the ongoing trauma-based mind control techniques which are being used. But I think it's more than that. I think people are becoming less intelligent, less able to be discriminating through the mass media onslaught. And that doesn't matter whether it's so-called alternative, libertarian or mainstream. I often get accused of saying things, for instance, that I never actually said. I'm sure you've come across this too. This used to be the tactic of the snakes employed in the captured media, but it now covers the useful idiots of the counter-narrative too. The reason I've carried on doing these shows is because it's an ongoing research project, and more importantly, those who benefit and contribute are a big part of the project. So this is an ongoing learning project for everyone involved, I hope, because I'm constantly learning from the information that I get and the insights, more importantly, the insights which come to me through those who listen and give their knowledge in return to what they've heard. So it is more than information, much more than information. It is the formation of minds that we're talking about here, working consciously and unconsciously to find the gaps in the conscious, real-time implementation of this subverted law system. The incoming information from those out there who have not had their minds taken over is actually invaluable. One recurring theme is that the level of infiltration and takeover of all schemes of activity is overwhelming. That is one thing that we have been reporting for the past 15 years. The whole basis of the present reality is that most have been incorporated into the plan. The revolutionary spirit has been well and truly captured and shaped by the head of the snake. A few perceptive types have found this out. The rest assist the head of the snake by being its body. The use of Darwinism, social Darwinism, Marxism, material atheism have conquered most of the public. And the tongue-tied and subverted voices of academia and of course government and the law, those who fight over terminology, are actually engaging the project. This is a big point because people get pedantic about descriptions of how things actually work. And I've found this over the last few weeks. People demand that you fit in with their worldview description of something which they believe to be true. But this is about control of everything, in case you haven't noticed. The head of the snake is not normal. It is not the way normal people think. They are not using your rules. So please do not think that their rules have anything to do with yours. The elders, who have manipulated their victims and of course believe none of that which they teach the cattle, they have a different belief system. These beliefs are drivers of change for subjugation and nothing more. Thanks to the captured press, the real gold is in the hands of the elders. And by that I don't mean people who are wise and of a certain age. I mean those who assume the position of elders. The steering is simple and it covers the need for the fake left and right, plus every other distraction and pointless direction in between. Over the years, I've known many of these tools and they believe they have their own minds and informed opinions until you find out the source of their mental servitude, which always goes back to the head of the snake. Most of these, of course, are never actually challenged on their beliefs. The creation story being replaced by the story for the dumb and dumber that nothing exploded and everything appeared, the Big Bang, may as well have been from the Big Bang, just entrapment for the time-bound, educated and, of course, limited view of those who are under global governance. Everything is reversed by the deceivers. For instance, tonight I saw something on the BBC website. It stated, President Volodymyr Zelensky says in a late-night address that Russia's target is the whole European project. This is a great example of the reversal and duplicity of the snake, of which, of course, he believes he is part. The target of those who control this corrupt arena are Europeans, which included Russia. So, that is a complete reversal. Russia's target is not the whole European project. The whole European project is that which is under the hypnotic spell of the head of the snake. Those participating in their own destruction are arming and enabling this globalist corporation and project. The helpless children of the cattle are being instructed to hate Putin and believe in climate change and having no definable gender. Okay, that's the whole European project, and it's not Russia that's doing it. Okay, so the cattle have become putty and believe they are in the safe hands of this global community corporation. The Zio-Nazi puppet Zelensky, like previous ones, will soon find out he is dispensable, and it will not be very long. The flag-waving masses may well have a martyr in the very near future. Just as they clapped and banged pans for the globalists and the death of their health system, they will participate once again in their own demise. Multiple fronts are what the plan is all about, and these fronts will continue. The human rights or people's rights were never meant to be realised and are a fraction of anything which has anything to do with their law. They are a fiction in the minds of those who have not yet tried properly to use them. So anybody who talks about human rights has never actually looked into the system of law under which they operate. The protocols say this, and there is no argument. The religion of the tyrant is law, and its only use is to control. Infiltration in the current situation is so obvious, but only to the detached observer. Who and what is in a position to overthrow an invisible force? Well, ask the learned elders. Only those, of course, who can see it. And that has not yet really happened. Those who did see it were easily picked off. Very easily picked off. Something more efficient, unpredictable and clever is obviously needed. Most blind revolutionaries stay blind until it's too late. I've seen many of this over the years. Many of this type of thing. It's always been the way. Tearing away any divinity and belief in a godhead was paramount, of course, and most recently delivered by the technocrats. The visible heads of the snake are constantly replaced. The retarded minds of the likes of Klaus Schwab and Yuval Harari are just this moment's front puppets in the war on the minds of the helpless. So, been quite heavy so far, but as I said the other week, why not? Let's have a very short break and come back in a minute.
If you realise how deep the rabbit hole goes, I mean, the people coming out now, even in the entertainment business, saying, I sold my soul to the devil so I could be famous. And you go, Jesus, yeah. And you look at people and you think, how did he get famous? He's crap. You know? And you think, oh, he must have sold his soul to the devil. Oh, here's Wayne again. He's going to give us all that New World Order crap. And you think, oh, why am I wasting my time even mentioning it? You know, it's only in conversation. And they'd rather talk about football. And, you know, you think, oh, what a waste of space. You know, and it's, oh, Manchester United did this. And you think, what a load of crap. Who cares? You know, who cares about Manchester United and Manchester City? And then you look, you think, this is it. They're just programmed. That's going to be their life. You know, women will watch soaps and men will go to football, and then you'll get up in the morning, you'll go to work and you'll do this, and then you'll finish at 5 if you're lucky. You'll go home, you won't have time for your kids, you won't. And you think, but is this what we're born for? You know, just to be slaves, really. You're just slaves.
Join me, Mark Windows, for Windows on the World live every Sunday 9 to 11 p.m. GMT. Check out our archive and programme stream at windowsontheworld.net. That was the late great Wayne Fontana, hitmaker of the 60s. Over the years, I've been able to pull out a few of these rebels within the music industry who actually managed to see through it. I made a film about Jet Harris, the original bass player of the Shadows. Still available at windowsontheworld.net. All this you have to do is scroll down and it says something like exclusive content here. I will be putting more films up, and the Heretics film is very nearly done at last. And what I like about these people that I've made little films about, and I made a film about Wayne, which I'm going to put out, is that they were total mavericks, really. And nobody would have actually told their story. And that is very particular in the case of Jet Harris, who actually fell out with a lot of people because of his alcoholism and his craziness, which all came, I think, from some kind of trauma and the fact that he really shouldn't have been in show business with his temperament. But it's a great film that I made with him, and very poignant. And ironically, the BBC and the Shadows have put out a 60th anniversary of the Shadows, and it doesn't even feature the man who gave them their name. Yes, Jet Harris, their original bass player, the James Dean of the Shadows, is absolutely left out, even though he's visible playing with the band in the first 15 minutes. Absolutely disgraceful the way people do that. What is wrong with them? Okay, so someone lets you down. 40 years later, when it's about the real history, do you have to write them out of history? The people have to be written out of history. Well, this really goes into the globalist concept because it filters down. So there you go. There's a British pop band who've also become the body of the snake, ruled by the head of the snake, because if they had any real integrity to what they do and they weren't living in fear, then they would just say, yeah, Jet was a pain in the arse, but we loved him. They can't even do that. Despicable in my opinion. That's just my opinion, of course. Okay, So I hope you're finding this interesting. I'm throwing out these concepts to see if people grasp onto them. And I think our listeners do, because the stuff I get back from them is often really intellectually challenging. So I thought I'd come up with something which may actually start tripping things in people's minds, which may give them a bit of insight, because the state of the media, mainstream, middle and alternative, is, okay, we can say we pick up information, but what are we actually learning? Are we actually progressing? Is the human race going anywhere? No, it's actually going backwards. People are saying that they can't absorb the information because there's too much of it. Well, that means that you're not actually looking at it in the correct way, because the mind remembers everything. Memories can never be forgotten. Isn't that interesting? Over the past year or so, I just get flashbacks to things I never knew I would remember doing. Have you had that? It's amazing, isn't it? In other words, we can store anything in there and it can be accessed at will. That's the interesting thing. Okay, let's get back to this. We were talking about the retarded minds of the AI crowd, Klaus Schwab and this Yuval Harari, who's merely the latest puppet used by the head of the snake, because, of course, he is the body of the snake and he embodies the snake because of what he is. The thing is that these people are just journeymen. They are people here for the moment. They will be replaced. They are on public view, so therefore they are actually of no real importance. They're just there for the chattering classes and the likes of globalist puppets like Russell Brand to present as something a little bit quirky, and they're not that bad really. Of course, then the cattle will argue endlessly over the merits of this and that, which is of no consequence whatsoever to the Global Action Plan. Okay, so yes, their version of the subjugation of the cattle is just the latest, and government and governance has changed. Let's have a look now at monarchy. Monarchy has been a past event in many countries for a long time. They've pretty much all stood down. The right of kingship has been taken away. How did that happen? Well, we go back to the 1700s and we can see how it happened. Just read books like Pawns in the Game. Just have a look at the history and the takeover by the head of the snake. We have to call him the head of the snake for legal reasons, of course. Okay, another recent phenomenon was the vacating of Buckingham Palace by agreement. I believe this happened from the 11th of the 3rd, 2020, when World War III was announced, because at that point the Queen of England knew surely that her days were numbered as a monarch. So when the UK monarchy defiled itself in the eyes of the public and the monarch herself has stood down, it is by consent. Their time was up by agreement. The distraction still goes on, but that is all it is. It would have been more honourable for the monarch to have at least made a coded speech to the more astute that their time was up. But the Saxe-Coburg-Gothas, like all puppet power, have no spine except in keeping their position. They were too spineless and already compromised to be victims of bloody assassination like the Romanovs. The crown puppets are fully on board with your enslavement and have been all along. Have a look at the sustainability king, King Charles, Prince Charles. They have been dumbed down, though, through clumsy breeding, and are now the laughing stock their controllers have made them. The idea was to bring down all the European monarchy within 200 years. That seems to have been the plan, and of course it's worked. Is there anything more embarrassing, though, than the offspring of these impostors? The times are defined by the arrested development of Harry and Meghan, closely followed, of course, by William and Kate. But just imagine how stupid their children will be. The final stage of victory, the right of kingship, has been disproved by their very existence, all achieved in a remarkably short time. The Brotherhood of the Snake even managed to get the Goys blaming their manipulation on the Jesuits. They openly brag about it in their own protocols. Because the Jesuits were a public organisation, they could then be used as a diversion by the Brotherhood of the Snake. It's all in their protocols. Interesting stuff, isn't it? The head of the snake is out of bounds and clever enough to stay that way, so we can't even talk about it. To get back to the present, Europe is and always was the target for destruction. The continent has been subverted, but of course not fully. But this in itself is a miracle. The Orthodox Church is still standing. The infiltration has to be voluntary and by consent. The coercion and methods, though, have no rule book. The religion of the controllers is law in their own terms and under their own terms. That is their control system, along with the reversal of natural order, which they believe is only possible through despotic tyrants. This is why anyone promoted by the cult can be used and sacrificed at any time. There are few who can resist the temptation. Few whose egos will not allow them to be used. This is the psychological brilliance of the Brotherhood. They know how to manipulate everybody because they've studied it, and also they impose the systems which control. It's not that complicated. There are few who can resist the temptation. What, though, if an organised resistance were to form? Well, it's not happened so far. Many believe they are resisting when they are merely assisting in the work. I have looked for the strong-minded and incorruptible amongst the flock. However, there are none on show publicly, but many behind the scenes, which is where they need to stay, are actually on the right lines and on the right road. However, these are not seen in any form of media. That's a very important thing to remember, that those who actually understand the most are seen the least, for very good reason. Because if they put their head above the parapet, they will surely be taken down. The conspiracy circus, of course, will be allowed to continue, because it does not address the problem, never has done and never will. There is a circus of chatter, which is all distraction, and everyone in that circus has already been captured. Over the years, the drivers of this have been explained in these very shows, and good examples of this have been given. But we are now in the end game. Well, let's see what they're saying. Environmental Social Governance, ESG, which is a strategy for overt control through fakery and mind control, and will capture all, or so they believe, under a demonic system which makes people feel good about their own demise. And of course, everything has to be done with consent. That is the only rule which their law system actually adheres to. First for corporations, of course, under the snake, and next for the whole populace, the Environmental Social Governance Initiative is coming. The fake ethical environmental slave system, well, it has to be bordering on genius, doesn't it? Get the population to enslave themselves and die, not for the Brotherhood, but for the planet. Get the population to hate all that desire freedom of thought. Global communitarians are involved in their own destruction. But of course, Microsoft and Bill Gates are the best and the greenest on the planet, as all are favoured fronts for governance through imposed law. That goes, of course, through every corporation, Amazon, anyone you care to mention, really. We could be here all night, but we're trying to keep it simple. Enemies will appear from the masses. As the middle classes wipe themselves out through being deceived and enjoying their demise through virtue signalling, they will become dangerous, which brings us on to a very important point. They will become dangerous not to the enemy, but to those who warned them about their own demise. Those who didn't get injected and didn't fall for the sustainability death cult will be those attacked by these steered and willing and soon to be triggered puppets. These people are being weaponized to attack you. They are being encouraged to destroy themselves on all fronts. These were the target of the UN global goals. They own houses and they earn money. That is not sustainable, and it will not be tolerated. Cleverly diverting the masses through regulation and false theories has worked through generations. Here's a point. Can your neighbours still think? Well, it's worth checking and noting for future reference. If you hear them using such weaponized words as collective responsibility, or even worse, community, mark them as a lost cause and possible adversaries. Do not let them surprise you at this moment by being blinded to their barely suppressed hate. Oh yes, they are being weaponized to hate you if you are outside this system of global governance and law. Say hello and don't ever tell them anything that will give them grounds for attack. And I've been trying to reiterate this to people because these injected people are starting to behave differently. Let's just say that. And their belief system is about to crumble because it can't be sustained in their own minds for much longer with what's going on. However, they're bamboozled and traumatized at every turn. What does that mean? They will turn on you, the enabler, who was trying to get them to wake from their slumber. That is always what happens historically. Say hello and don't ever tell them anything that will give them grounds for attack. They are currently being weaponized and are being increasingly traumatized and given cognitive dissonance whilst being destabilized to attack without any cause. Have you noticed this? I've noticed it. This, when it comes, will be unpredictable, and once their belief system has been hacked open by their controllers, they will attack all enemies of the global death cult. Such is a subversion of reality. Their words and beliefs only really mean enslavement and especially intolerance. They are in all cities, towns and villages, spying, infiltrating and being primed for the time when they will literally kill those who have been described to them as Amalek, enemies, adversaries of the globalist death cult. Will they ever find out or want to know that they have been duped, though? Well, not at this stage, as most not only have been indoctrinated, but also fully inoculated. This is basically a very important point. There is now no need for behavioural change, as they have been physically changed as well as mentally subjugated. There seem to be no wise elders in this fight. They have been mainly indoctrinated for the cause and are willing to fly the globalist yellow and blue flags, which are a sign of their compliance and belief in the new system, as were their masks and NHS rainbows. All this was showing compliance to global, intolerant Noahide law, which means they have no rights unless they comply with having no rights, under an outside jurisdiction of which they know little and mostly nothing. If you are outside the death cult, they want you dead, and that will mean those rainbow death cult window stickers or that yellow and blue flag of compliance and surrender. These are their war cries. Of course, they need to openly show their lack of spine and open servitude to their fellow indoctrinees. It is on show everywhere, isn't it? Those not in the cult need to be clever and show outwardly nothing to these mercenaries of a foreign power, which is what they are. The global power for which they work and slave for every minute of their waking hours. The whole point of the global community was that they become globalist and not global, as they will want to stay where they are and under full control, all for the common good. The war is hotting up and it will be on multiple fronts. The whole idea is to remain uncaptured. It has become apparent, though, that there are still many in an underground which is not even loosely connected who can yield wisdom and a powerful alternative. This, however, is nowhere to be found on public display, and it must remain out of sight, and especially out of sight of the indoctrinated. This is no time to engage the already captured in a dialogue which they not only resent, but will be coerced literally to kill for. When they lose everything, they will be turned on you, the thinker, the one who tried to warn them. It is a time to be aware and deep knowledge for those who appreciate the reality and keep knowledge, rather. It is a time to be aware in this deep knowledge and keep that knowledge amongst those who appreciate the reality which has been imposed and can see beyond it. Of course, when things start really getting weird and destiny beckons, then only then is it time to act. The protocols of their power state that they have set one against another, nation against nation, race against race. Well, they call this diversity and empowerment. They say God has endowed them with the genius for their task. The cattle, they think, cannot see beyond the manipulation. Their God, according to them, gave them dominion over all. The creation of strong belief in non-belief, the disempowerment of the true and the reinforcement of the false is all they have. Those who have been indoctrinated are lying to themselves, divided and conquered by their own beliefs. Does truth work? It will work only when directed specifically and for the strongest purpose. The misdirection covers all, and the plan encompasses the world. The constant attack on the public mind has to be relentless, to debilitate the public mind by criticism and self-hatred through, of course, self-criticism. Self-hatred. That's exactly what sustainable development is. Or just as useful self-love through ego and narcissism, where of course nothing of value can be observed, which is what I was talking about earlier, which is why people hear what they want to hear and don't hear what you've actually said. New Age brainwashing to keep the Western mind in acquiescence, which they define as inner peace and tranquility, is based on self-deception, laziness and fakery, using props, baubles, bangles and beads, of course, the loss of innate intelligence through spiritual weakness, and of course collectivity, collective emptiness. It's always about collectivity. Never about the individual as part of a collective, because that would mean that there was some kind of participation. There is no participation, there is just imposition. That's what's called consensus from above. That's what's called community. The head of the snake employ many speakers whose empty words fill the airwaves, of course, at all times. Nothing of meaning or importance is aired in their world. They argue over trifles and party politics which are of no importance. When Tsar Nicholas spoke of the secret power a century and more ago, he then said, at the time, it was too late. Well, it was too late for him. How then are the indoctrinated still being distracted to such an extent by the promise of change, when they clearly have no idea what is meant by it? Faith, hope and charity mean as much in the fake reality as liberty, equality and fraternity. The head of the snake say the cattle will lose their head in the labyrinth. The constructed fake opposing principles are merely a sideshow to distract, of course, as they have been for the entire age. Their words such as capitalism, socialism, liberalism are merely a cover for the undercurrent which controls all. The head of the snake predicted the cattle will fail to understand each other. Well, what do they say? They fear. What do they fear? What do they say in their own documentation that they are afraid of? What they fear is personal initiative. Real initiative cannot be factored into their constructed playbook, which captures all belief and opinion by consensus. This, combined with audacity and surprise, is outside their playbook. Unpredictability is their worst enemy, as they have to believe that overt control is already in place. This is all about control, which is why anybody who may be a bit of a loose cannon in their minds and in their world is stamped upon, because of course this might catch on. How could unpredictability be controlled? It couldn't. The real threat is from outside their system. Inside their system, everything is inverted. If this is understood, they can be undermined. Laughing at their system, of course, is a good way of starting. It's a very underestimated power. Not meaning just wit aimed at their puppets, laughing at their leaders, or the people who the public think are leaders, but ridicule aimed properly. The audacity has so far been all theirs, but the audacity which is not incorporated into their system is what they fear. Despite the overt control, the head of the snake fear the thinker who can act without fear and decisively with a plan which is outside their system. This is easier said than done, of course. But they do say, they openly say, one such thinker is worth more than 1,000,000. And a few such thinkers at the same time would be their worst nightmare, as attacking on multiple fronts is what they and only they think they can do. Well, it's a tough job, but the adversaries have many weaknesses, of course. They want you dead or enslaved. That is what they call sustainable. They want a subjugated and godless shower of collectivist hypocrites. That is what they call diversity. What if their captured term resilient went back to its original meaning? Those who are defined by this word in its true sense would be the real adversaries of the head of the snake, and the head cannot survive without the body. Well, thanks for all of your fantastic comments on the live streams and for the people who have written in. The reason I'm doing this kind of series of thoughts and ideas which may inject something useful is because of the years I've put into trying to write about it. I've got a book which I will also put out free, but I am going to get it printed so you can buy it as well and help us out. And if you want to help us out, please do, because nobody else does. But trying to keep it upbeat is important. The stuff I'm talking about is very profound. It's not going to appeal to the conspiratards and the people who think that holding common law courts in car parks is a good idea. Mark, we are winning. I'm sick of this globalism. Why? You used to be such a positive person, Mark. I don't know, I'm going for a cup of tea. Thanks, Malcolm. I'm going to put your manifesto out next week. And for those who want to join us, keep an eye out for the live streams. I should be doing one Tuesday. And I don't like to time date these shows, but just have a look at windowsontheworld.net. Join our Discord group if you would like to engage in chat. And please subscribe to us on Spreaker and Odyssey. Everything is on the website, which is now turning into an encyclopedia. So with that in mind, thank you for listening and good night, everybody.